name is Mary Pell, and in this session we'll be discussing valuation biases. So by the end of this session, you should be able to explain what valuation bias means, discuss the sources of valuation bias, and also explain how these biases manifest in business valuation. We'll also outline several means or ways by which we can mitigate the effects of valuation biases. We will be looking at the various sources of valuation biases and how they manifest in business valuation. And finally, we'll discuss the processes that can be taken or the steps that can be taken to minimize valuation bias. We made mention earlier that valuation is not an objective exercise. So any preconceptions, any biases or misconceptions that we have about the companies we want to value would find its way into the value we come out with at the end of the day. So when we start valuing the firm, usually we have our own assumptions or preconceived conditions or situations about the firm. And usually our ideas about the firm are formed even before we start inserting numbers and figures into the models we build. And we would want to consider the sources of these biases and evaluate how they manifest themselves in valuation, and also suggest ways by which we can minimize them. So valuation bias stems from three primary sources which we are going to discuss. And the first one is that it actually begins with the companies we choose to value. So our decision to actually value or undertake valuation of a particular company may be due to something we have read or something we have heard, or our opinions about a company as to whether the company has been overvalued or undervalued. And therefore, even right from the scratch, we have our own preconceived ideas about the company. Some may be positive, others may be negative. However, all the preconceived ideas we have are what manifest into the biases, and that's what gets reflected in the value at the end of the day. And therefore, it's necessary for us to identify these biases. So, in determining which company to value, we already have our own conceived ideas about the company, and therefore they can be primary sources of bias in terms of valuing or in terms of valuation. Also, in many valuations, there are institutional factors that also add up to the already substantial bias we have at the beginning of the process in actually deciding which company we want to value. So, for example, when it comes to equity analysts, there's the perception that they prefer to, or they are skewed towards giving more buy decisions than sell decisions. Okay. And also there's institutional factors may also be due to influence or pressures from senior managers or those whom analysts have to report to, and all these can constitute to valuation bias. The third one would be when rewards or punishment structures are associated with the findings of the valuation. So in valuing a company, when your reward or your punishment has to do with whether you find out if the company is overvalued or undervalued, that can also contribute to valuation bias. In situations where your compensation depends upon if you have to find out if the firm is overvalued or undervalued. If you want to get more compensation or more commission on the work you're about to do, then you would want to overestimate the value of the company so you get paid more. Or in cases where you are not really, or you have some ill-fated relationship with the company and you personally do not like the company you are valuing, you may find yourself undervaluing the company for whatever personal reasons you have. And all these biases find their way into the value that is produced at the end of the day. And also it also explains why valuation in terms of acquisitions are also upwardly skewed. So now biases can manifest in business valuation in different ways. The first one is in the inputs that we use in the valuation. So when we value companies, we constantly make assumptions These assumptions can be optimistic or pessimistic. So, for instance, when you assume that a company that is enjoying higher operating margin or profit margin would continue to maintain that kind of profit margin that they are enjoying, then you are having a more optimistic view about the company, and that would influence the kind of inputs you make, especially when you have to forecast cash flows for such a company. Also, when you take the pessimistic approach and you assume that due to competition in the long run or in the coming years, the margin would reduce, that is also pessimistic and it would affect the inputs that you use in valuation in forecasting your cash flows. And that is how bias is manifest in business valuation. There's also the post valuation thinking, and that is where the analyst revisits assumptions they've made prior to the valuation and they attempt to get a value that's closer to what they had expected to gain when starting. So usually people also make assumptions and revisit them. And this is what we call post valuation thinking. Biases can also be manifested in this manner when the valuer or the analyst leaves the value they get after the process as it is, but then they attribute the difference between the value estimate and what they thought to a qualitative factor such as synergy or strategic considerations or any other factor they could actually think of. So here they try to find reasons why they didn't get the value they were estimating or they were assuming they would get, or why they actually got the value that they had at the end of the day. And they would want to use qualitative factors to attribute the difference to. And this is very common in acquisition valuations where usually the analysts or valuers are called back to justify the values that they get at the end of the day. And usually it's because of sometimes valuers taking strong positions prior to the start of the valuation process, or actually yes, or actually making their assumptions known or stating a figure when they've actually not conducted the valuation to come out with the actual estimate of the value of the business. Now, there are several ways to minimize valuation bias. The first one is to reduce institutional pressures. Also, you can delink valuation from reward or punishment. You do not tie an analyst or evaluator's compensation to the results they would get from the valuation process that they will be undertaking. If indeed you want to get a fair market value, a fair value on the actual value of the company, you would want to detach any considerations, either reward or punishments, from valuation. Also, there should be no pre-commitment on the part of the analyst or the valuer. You should make sure that you don't take any strong public stance or positions about the company you want to assess, as they cannot contribute to biases. Also, self-awareness is very key when it comes to minimizing valuation bias. As the saying goes, man, know thyself. So know yourself, know any preconceptions that you have, take note of any biases you have or any unrealistic assumptions, and then as much as possible try to be objective, stick to facts and not unrealistic assumptions or preconceptions you have. Also, honest reporting is very key to minimizing bias in valuation. So in this session, we discussed valuation bias, the sources of biases, and how they can manifest in businesses. Also, we also mentioned how or the ways by which we can minimize biases in business valuation. Thank you.